I am Bill Murphy. I am your host, and in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to introduce our guest presenter. And you'll see that we're going to leave our cameras on. For those of you that were with us in December last year during COVID, well, for the last 2 years during COVID, we had people ask if we could keep the cameras on, make it a little more intimate and personal, so they feel like they're in the room with us. I did one last month with a friend, and we were able to be in the same town, same place at the same time. We're going to do that when we can, but it won't always work. Ron is in his home state of Indiana. I am here in Iowa, and we're not going to let that slow us down. Except I just had technical difficulty on my. There you go. ASP, Quick Supply, Cascade Geosynthetics. I am our engineer for all of our companies. We just recently updated this slide so that we see that we have over 45 years of experience with some of our locations, and our 12,000 plus customers is closer to 15,000. Our sales team is full of technical experts who can help with sales, but they bring me in when they need even more technical advice, and I help with the engineering side, also a lot of the promotional work that we do. We do have CPESCs in all of our companies, and one of the things that has helped us survive the last couple of years is our strength of logistics. We have a lot of warehouses, we have a lot of trucks, drivers, warehouse experts who can handle a lot of product, and they can break it down into smaller loads for projects as you need them. One of the things we work really well with Flexamat on is getting product delivered to the site when they need it. And that's key to success of a lot of these projects, staying on time and under budget. Just a quick map of the U.S. that shows the locations that we serve. Most of you are probably tuning in here from the Midwest today. We seem to get a lot of numbers from our ASP and Quick Supply markets, but we are growing in attendance on our webinars with Bowman Construction Supply in Colorado and across the Rocky Mountains to Cascade Geo. I'm available to help with any of those companies. For those of you that know us really well, this is a repeat. For those of you that are just getting to know us better, we are experts in construction site supply materials. I usually get involved with the categories shown here on the screen now for erosion, sediment control, geosynthetics. Stormwater management is my forte. Revegetation solutions, that's growing in popularity. And hardscapes, we have a hardscapes division in some, but not all of our locations. Those guys really don't need my help. But I'm glad that they're still involved. We have a couple of those guys on this webinar, but we do try to cross market and help each other out. This connects with what I said before. We can handle a lot of material, and we can handle small jobs as well. The hardscape display is represented with the quick supply display down on the lower left. But our yards continue to grow. Our warehouses continue to grow. Is struggling in some aspects with shipping and receiving. If we get the product anywhere near us, we can get it. And we even are working with partners to go to the coast and get what we can. I offered to rent a boat and to go out into the ocean to try to get cargo containers, and I was told no, that's a bit extreme. So that's about the only thing we're not doing yet. Again, I'm proud of our drivers. We take very good care of them. The world is short of drivers. Our country's short of drivers. There's signs all over the big cities trying to recruit drivers. So it's important that companies keep theirs happy, and we're blessed, very, very blessed. So this might pop up again at the end of the presentation, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because the more time I talk, less time we have for Ron.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody that's on today. My name's Ron Geater. I'm the regional manager for Motes Enterprises. Back in November, I just celebrated 5 years with the company. I spent the other 8 years with American Excelsior, which is the erosion control blanket that's underneath the concrete blocks. A little bit about Motes. We've been selling Flexamat since 2000. We have manufacturing locations in Cincinnati, Altair, Texas, Minot, North Dakota. And we recently took a fourth machine out to California, where we have a 2 million square foot levee job that we're getting ready to start in 2022. I have a lot of slides to go through, so enough about me. The reason I have a lot of slides is because I think pictures tell the story of the product. I like to show kind of the beginning, the middle, and the end, so you get an idea of how the product works.
It clicked. There's just a bit of a delay, but it clicked. I'm checking on the webinar here.
Okay. So what is Flexamat? It's a 5,000 PSI concrete. The block are 6.5 by 6.5 inches with a low profile of 2.25 inches. We have an 1.5 inch gap between the blocks, which represents a 30% opening for vegetation to grow up through. The pyramid shape is what allows us to roll it up into a nice tight roll. In the picture on the bottom, That is a truckload of Flexamat. We get 4,800 square feet to a truck, or that's 48,000 pounds. Product weighs 10 pounds per square foot. So the Flexamat systems, we have 3 different underlayments. The one on top is Flexamat Standard. It's got Curl X2 underneath it. The picture on the right is Flexamat Plus. It's got Curl X2 and Recyclex. And the third one is a 10-ounce non-woven. So the standard, you're going to use sheet flow like on a slope. Flexamat Plus would be at an outlet, a channel. And the 10-ounce non-woven, you're looking at drivable surfaces, bridge abutments, anything like that. You can see we offer multiple widths. Standard lengths are 30, 40, 50, but we can customize. If your job's 22 feet or 31 feet, we can make that happen. So here we have a new feature that we've created about a year ago.
Why did you do that?
Well, I'm going to get into that, Bill. I've got some slides here to show you exactly why we created this extension. Essentially, the widest mat we make is 16 foot wide. So when we make the tail, we can block off part of the machine and make a 15.5 foot wide mat with a 12-inch geogrid tail and the erosion control blanket underneath it. And this is a picture to show you why we created the tail. This is our old way of doing things. Here we are protecting a slope. Normally what you would have had, the contractor would have had to do is put down the mat, peel it back. We sold a 2.5 foot by 90 foot roll of Recyclex. You have to roll that down so that 2 foot goes on either side of the mat. And that's kind of time consuming for the contractor. Now that we have the tail, so this is what the extension. So when you're looking at the roll and you're unrolling it, you know, the tail, if it's on the right, it's a right side extension. If it's on the left, it's a left side extension. So I wanted to show a couple of different jobs on how this is being used. If it'll turn, there you go. All right, so here you can see the pipe there in the background. And so this is an install where we put the tail parallel to flow. So instead of, if we didn't have that tail there, the contractor would have had a peel back block, put in the erosion control blanket, peel it back, lay the next mat. We've already got that in there for them. They don't have to do anything. So you've got your tail, and then you'll see as they unroll it, covering up and making a nice tight fit. So there they are unrolling it.
Yeah, that delay gets a little longer sometimes. 8 or 9 seconds is too much. You're doing
so
great.
There it is. It's all locked in. It's going nowhere. So there's parallel to flow. And then last year I happened to be on a job site where I wanted to be able to show perpendicular to flow. So you'll see the first mat is, you know, the 15.5, you've got your tail. So to the left of the tail, obviously that's the slope we're going up. So you've got, you know, water, when the water hits the mat, it's each mat, it's going to push it into each one of those tails. You wouldn't want to have the tail on the opposite side, because if you did, it would actually be pulling away from one another, and we wanted to pull into the next mat. So right there, you can see this was a job that they had all of that installed in, I want to say, 5 or 6 hours, which this contractor is very experienced. So it went in very well. So this is our production yard in Cincinnati. Our machine's 16 foot wide. Essentially, we have a hopper on the machine, a ready mix truck pulls up. Once they start to pull the machine, the grid flows in with the concrete into the molds. And there's just a shot. We can make one mat in one day, 16 foot wide by a mile long. And then the next slide is my counterpart that lives in Tallahassee. He was able to put a 4-block sample in his yard. He took the sample out because he was going to a trade show. And this is to show you, why this system works. You can see all that great root system that has burrowed into the soils, and you got that grass growing up. Once you get that grass growing up to the block, it's locked in, the product's going nowhere.
That's incredible. Awesome pictures.
This is more for the contractor, just showing them how we have straps on the rolls, how to hook onto those rolls. You can see somebody made a J hook with some rebar. That just really helps with pulling the mat around when you're doing the install. I keep this in here. One of the jobs I did with ASP in Lenexa, Kansas, they wanted a flame resistant grid. So Husker was able to provide that for us. You could probably believe this if you're from Kansas City or that Lenexa area, but when they get 5 inches of rain, the water will be halfway up those trees. So I was told the reason we went with the flame resistant is because they wanted to plant a native seed and at some point do a controlled burn. So here was, I don't know, probably 3 months after install. I went back a year later, it's all gone. And then I went back a year later to get a drone shot of the overview. And you can see there's Flexamat here and there's Flexamat there. I do want to point out for any engineer that's on here, this could have easily have been Flexamat in front of those outlets. The 6460 large scale flume testing, that flume is 2 foot wide. What they do is they run water over the product for hours and hours, trying to get a 1/2 inch of soil loss so we can determine our shear stress and water velocities. So this is a 30% slope on a sandy loam soil. Our shear stress is 24 pounds per square foot. Water velocity is 19 feet per second. A few years ago, the Texas DOT wanted to test it on a 20% slope. All that did was take the water velocity from 19 to 30. So you can see the product can take on a lot of water. And when you put Flexamat up against other TRMs, riprap, whatever it is, you can see we're 2, 3, 4 times their values. But really the key thing to look at here is where it says unvegetated. You know, we do have a TRM underneath the Flexamat Plus system, but in order for them to get to their, let's say 10 pounds of shear stress, that blanket has got to be vegetated. So let's say you specify a TRM in a channel, 3 days later, you get a 3-inch, 4-inch rain event. It could wipe that blanket out. The great thing about Flexamat is day one, when you put in my product, it doesn't matter how much it rains, it's going to stay in place and not move. And this is just a good example to show, you know, a nice clean look compared to, you know, you don't have to worry about a mower hitting rocks or weeds growing up through it, or, you know, kids throwing rocks. If they wanted this vegetated, it could be. If they want to mow over it, they can do that as well. You're going to find out in this presentation, I'm not a big fan of riprap. And normally when I make fun of it, people tell me, well, just use bigger rock, right? Well, you know, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But as you can see in this example, the Flexamat has stayed, whereas the water came across and knocked some pretty decent size riprap over and out of the way. So I just figured this guy right here on his clipboard is writing down how much he really and thoroughly enjoys riprap. Okay, this is something I put this in here. This is what you don't want to do. This is not how you want to design Flexamat, is leaving a 2 or 3 foot gap, filling that in with riprap, and then starting your Flexamat there. You know, this is for overtopping. You would really want to start the mat up next to the side of the pavement and then work your way down the slope. Here we say the performance life is 75 years. The reason being is once you get grass growing up or natural sedimentation filling up over the grid, that's why we say the product will last so long. Once again, we talked about one truckload, it was 4,800 square feet. If you take the same area and put 18 inches of riprap, I bring in one truck, they have to bring in 37. Not too good for the environment. Here, I just like to show the product is very flexible. There are times where you're going to have to make a cut. It's just a contractor using a concrete saw blade and cutting the mat. The only thing that's wrong with this picture is when they took it, they installed the sod here, but not over here. Obviously, you would never want to leave that edge bare, either sod, erosion control blanket. We don't want water getting underneath that edge, trying to reel things out underneath the mat. And there is a proper way to put in these our 18-inch rebar staples. So to the right of this guy in the white shirt, this is on a slope application, so the water is going to be running down. You want the anchors as if the water was going to run through it, so that when they pound it down and it's at the bottom of the block, when the water hits the block, it's going to hit the rebar. If they had it turned sideways, what I call skinny, there's nothing there to hold the mat in place, and it could possibly try to rip it. We do work with a company called Drivable. They make us a crossplate anchor. What you need for this is a gas-powered driver, a drive rod. It's a jack jaw. The crossplate is now covered with epoxy, and it's all one. The anchor's all together. So what you do is, I normally used to say the only time you'd use a crossplate anchor is maybe at the bottom of a channel where you're worried about the water lifting the mat. So you take the driver, you drive it down, and then you get a hold of it with the jack jaw and grab a hold of that cable. All it takes is about 1.5 handles pushing down. It'll set the duckbill anchor that went in skinny, and then the excess, you just take your wire clippers and cut off the excess. So bottom of a channel or a 1-to-1 slope. This is pretty steep. Manufacturer's recommendation is to put an anchor in every 3 feet in a diamond pattern. We do go around trees. I'm going to show you how we go around this outlet. We do boat ramps, pretty versatile. Every one of our rolls is labeled with the size of it. So like on this is really great for the truck to pull up. They know that each roll is going to go 50 feet. So now it's really easy for the install, for the contractor to grab it, unroll it, grab it, and unroll it, and not have to worry about stockpiling across the road and dodging traffic and things like that. Safety, you know, a lot of DOTs like to use riprap as check dams. You know, this is mobile. The car goes off the road. It's not going to do anything to the Flexamat. Here's a job 20 minutes from where I live. So you'll find in this presentation, I have jobs that are this size, a 10 by 40, and I've got jobs that were 250,000 square feet. We do all in betweens. Up above these guys, there's a road, Ireland Road, and whenever they'd get a rain event, that stormwater would come down and wash out the soil and take it into the creek, which is not a good thing. So I went out there, they asked me, hey, would Flexamat work? I said, yeah, just soil, backfill it, you know, compact it. So they had their own equipment. They put in a 10 by 40 and got it all locked in, did a great job covering up that piece of culvert. And because the job's only 20 minutes away, I'm able to drive over there anytime I want. And I think the thing that kills me the most is the people that live next door to this install, they actually mow it and maintain it. If they didn't, it would look like all this over here. So you can do it either way, mow it or just let it go and be natural. All right, installation is pretty simple. Prepare your subgrade, get your big rocks and chunks out of there. Slap down your seed and then roll out your mat. So I'm really interested to see how this is going to work out. All right. So this is really interesting. They're actually using one roll to unroll the next roll. And if it wasn't on this webinar, and we were in real time, this takes all of about 7 seconds to go down the slope. So really enjoy slope installs. Gravity does the work. Okay. So then I thought, well, I wanted to show you a more realistic install, you know, flat ground. This is an 8 by 50. It's the same job where you saw the staging. It's a median application for the Indiana DOT. These guys had never worked with the product. I think they thought in the beginning they would get a truckload installed, you know, maybe every couple days. When I timed this video, it took them all of 3 minutes and 42 seconds to unroll it. So by the end of the job, they were doing 2 to 3 truckloads a day. So it really does go in very fast. Here's American Excelsior's Erosion Control Lab. They used to have 40 ton of rock in there. They tore it out, put in Flexamat. And they normally don't let the vegetation get quite this tall, but they did it for the purpose. We wanted to be able to show you that you are able to mow over the product. A little bumpy ride, but it can be done. So he's mowing over it. I'd like to get to the bottom point. You know, where did we get to? And so a little more than, you know, 2 months later, there it is, mowed down. And then they have an event every September that I've started to go to. So I took this picture a couple of years ago, which would have put the install at about 8 years. And this is typically what every job looks like. You don't even know the Flexamat's there. Fully vegetated. I can tell you this, it sure looks a lot better than that 40-ton of rock they had in there.
This is awesome. I'm excited about this part here.
So I told Bill that last year we had our guys really work on our details to where they're really like 3D and they're really more detailed than ever. You can see here where we've got the extension here, you know, if you're wider than 16, if you're in the channel, if you can get out of the channel, you know, take a couple block out. If you can't get out of the channel, you know, recess 2 block in at a 45. So this one we're showing, these examples are channel applications parallel to flow. So here's a job I did with ASP out of their Wichita location. This is in Wichita, Kansas, the McConnell Air Force Base. I'll probably say it too many times, but a lot of these installs, these contractors had never used the product. So, you know, here it is. I got out there one day, they were getting it prepped up. Then I got out there another time 6 months later when they had it installed. They did a great job. And I'm telling you, when I went back a year later, I was just absolutely astounded by the kind of vegetation that we have growing up in this channel. So then real quick, you just go to the other side, which was much smaller. And then what they did at the structure is they've got concrete at the lip so that when the water goes over it, there's no way for water to get underneath the mat. And then once again, you're going to see another nicely vegetated side of the area.
I want to chime in on that, Ron. So you mentioned the details. This is where it's hugely important. You are really good at showing good and bad examples, really successful projects where they did everything right, and some projects where somebody didn't ask for help or they didn't have a pre-con or they didn't listen to instruction and did it wrong. Like anything else that we offer, it's got to be installed right. So your details are great 3 times. Once with the engineer when they're designing, so they know how to design, how much quantity they're going to need. Second, the bidding process. We love to get to talk to contractors. So if it's somebody new, they bid it right up front instead of being scared and overbidding it. And then the third on the pre-con for installation. So Ron's available. We're all available to our company. We're all available to be on site and help with that.
So I'll go through these real quick. I forget, I put this in the beginning to show the example of the tail, but I did this just to show you the full install. So you've got the tail, and then you're going to see that it's abutted. And then now I've got a shot showing the whole job, you know, once it's finally completed. There it is. Locked in, going nowhere. Here's probably one of my favorite jobs. This is my first job ever with ASP doing MoDOT. Page Avenue. The unfortunate thing about this job is they left all this concrete in there, which is okay, but then they gave us the other 2/3. And what's really interesting about this job is they put a non-woven in the bottom and Flexamat Plus on the side. And when I asked about the non-woven, I'm telling you, when I was out there and took this picture, there was no rain that day. So this is a channel that I want to say gets constant water flow all the time. So they figured if they go with the non-woven, it's not going to vegetate. So that's what they did. And then I went back, you know, and I'm like, okay, they're right. Nothing's growing in the middle. Got a bunch of weeds coming up the side. But the killer thing is when I went back 6 months later.
That's awesome.
I mean,
it's just like a natural stream bed on steroids. I mean, it's not going anywhere.
And I went back there this summer and it looks exactly the same. I wanted to take an aerial shot so you could see the nice vegetated look or the ugly concrete channel there. The other thing is if you live around Kansas City, you can see the billboard. If you're harassed at work, you can contact junglelaw.com. It's the only joke I have in the entire presentation.
Little plug there.
Here's another job with ASP. This one's a dandy. This is the southwest side of Kansas City. I did not know this literally until 2 years after the install that above the Flexamat is about a mile long concrete channel. So they were kind enough to let that mile run all the way down onto my little itty bitty Flexamat right at the tail end. But that's okay. It's fared well. It looks good. You can see it's vegetated in. Kind of an interesting neighborhood. Shopping carts, sofas were in the channel at one time. And then I happened to be in Kansas City a couple years ago, and I always like it when it rains, so I can go out there and take videos of my product working. The unfortunate thing is when I got out here at this point, the storm had already been done 5 hours earlier. But if I would have been out there earlier, I'm telling you, this water would have been up the side slopes probably another 10 feet and going 10 times faster. Unfortunately, the webinar is not going to give you the true feeling of how fast this water is going, but you can see it's quite a bit that's going over top of it. And then here's our detail for a channel layout perpendicular to flow. So this is a job in Kingman, Arizona. We actually took our 4th machine and produced the mat on site. That's quite a 425,000 square foot channel. You can see how big it is, the width of it. And so here I can see the tails here, which tells me the water's coming at it this way. And then here's just a shot of a lot of Flexamat being installed at one time. Here's our detail for slope armoring. You know, if you don't have room at the top, you're going to trench in 18 inches. You're going to toe in 18 inches. If you've got 3 or 4 feet at the top of the slope, that's how we normally would like to run the mat. You know, if you're going more than one mat over another, you're just going to do an overlap seam there. So here's a slope. It was a 10 by 40 and an 8 by 40. What I like to show here is this was in the February, March in Holland, Michigan. They should have had 4 feet of snow on the ground, but they had to do this repair. And what I like to show is right in here, you can see how the Flexamat, it went down because they didn't get a very good compaction. And what's good about that is the fact that Flexamat is flexible. It conformed to the earth. It went down with however the contour was. If the product was really rigid, we would have the Grand Canyon under there right now, and we wouldn't even know how bad it is. So, you know, you go back and I get a picture, you know, obviously I want to document showing it vegetated in. And then I went back probably a year later and just got a shot of it with my drone, just showing, yeah, you can barely see, you can see some. I guarantee if I go back there now, I won't see any mats. Bill, do I need to look at the questions now or?
Well, I was going to offer you that. So we're right at the halfway point. Can you, if you want to pull up the Q&A, you can, or I can. Actually, I just took over controls on accident. That's one of the downsides to me being the host and you being a panelist.
All right. Well, you mentioned the riprap outlet could be Flexamat instead. What are the limitations to Flexamat? I wouldn't think it could be used at every culvert or pipe. Depending, so I'm going to revert that back to, depending on your shear water velocity is what's really going to determine that. Anytime you have, like, let's say a 48-inch pipe, we're going to recommend a 16-foot wide mat. You get a 20-inch pipe, or let's say you have 5 outlet pipes in one area going underneath the road. Now, instead of us going parallel to flow, we're going to have to go perpendicular and run it the other way so that we can cover and get outside of the pipes, so that we can do that. So, but to answer your question, it's really what are the water velocities in the shear stress?
Yep.
When installing Flexamat parallel up against the concrete low flow liner, how should the Flexamat be installed and keyed in to prevent it from failing up against the flow liner? Parallel. So if I'm reading this correctly, basically abutting to that concrete low flow liner, you're going to want to trench it in and then probably put about a 6 to 8 inch either concrete grout or some ready mix in there to where that abutment is, essentially.
That's right. So I'm going to say done on those. We'll save them in the Q&A, and I'll be able to minimize the Q&A, Ron. And then if you click back on your screen, you'll take back over control. Got it. Yeah, you got
it. All
it.
right, so here's a slope that we did on the Ohio River. You can see they had a lot of stuff to grade out. We ended up doing about 200,000 square feet. One thing I do like to point out about this job is I went back to the engineer to tell him I wanted to do a case study, and I said, you know, why, I understand the river, but what were some of your considerations of why you use Flexamat? And he said it really was dependent on the DNR. They wanted something that was wildlife friendly, so deer and things like that could walk over it. They can't walk over riprap. So that was one of the, which I thought was, you know, kind of a neat thing, that, you know, people looking at it as being an animal friendly product. I'm going to have to get going. So this was about 4 months after the install. Look at the tree line. And when I go to the next slide, you'll see the water was up on the mat considerably. Actually, where this debris was, I walked from that down to the bottom of the mat. It was up there 33 feet. The owner of the project had thought at one point this area of the mat had tore away. But once, as you can see, once the water receded, the contractor did an excellent job towing in the bottom. We do have some crossplate anchors down at the bottom, so it did not go anywhere. I thought it was pretty impressive for that river to be up there for probably a couple weeks and didn't do anything. And this is just kind of a drone shot showing a wider view of the whole job. Here's our outlet armoring. So right here is that guideline I was telling you about. So a 48-inch pipe, you can use a 16-foot wide mat. Now, if you go to a 60-inch, now we're going to have to turn the mat the other way. So basically, where the mat meets the outlet structure, there's going to be an 18-inch trench, and you're going to fill that in with concrete. And then here is a armoring where if you want to go above the structure, that's fine, and just roll over and cut out. You know, there may be some areas that you're going to want to put some concrete around the edges or in the front as well. And then some examples. So you can see with the riprap here, how it's scoured out. We tore it out, put in Flexamat. Now you got a nice, clean, mobile surface. Here's a job we did this year. This project was called the Indianapolis Levee. To the right of the excavator is the White River that runs through Indianapolis. So I just happened to be out on the job site when they were doing the install. So I got a picture of them setting the roll above and rolling it out. And you can see they cut out around the structure. Now they're grabbing the excess and pulling it out, which is pretty neat. And then here you'll see the full install where they put concrete around the front edge of the outlet and around the sides, just so you don't get any water getting in underneath the mats. They did a really good job beveling in the edge at a 45-degree angle. You don't want to leave that bare because that can create problems.
That's beautiful. That's a problem area always up and around those culverts. That's awesome.
Correct. Here's one, 3 10 by 30s. A couple things here. They forgot to put the seat in, and they did a really big overlap between the 3 mats, which we don't really recommend that. But when you go back to it, it's amazing how some things just tend to work out. And what I like about this was a county job, and they tell me that the water would actually go over the road, and they just got tired of going back 3, 4, 5 times, going back to repair it. Now this is off their bucket list, right? They've got it armored. It's got vegetation growing up through it. Now they don't have to worry about that problem anymore. They can move on to bigger and better things. Here you can see the concrete above. They went around nice and tight around there, and then, you know, down the slope we go. And like I said, if you want to mow over that, if they want that vegetated, no big deal. Let it grow. All right, here's the outlet. Come on. Roll it over. And then obviously cut it out, and you'll see they did a great job getting a nice tight fit around that outlet structure. And here's an overview of the entire channel and what it looks like.
Looks awesome. You mentioned earlier all like mowing over it. One of the big things this time of year is snowmobiles. A lot of the DOTs don't want any rock. Snowmobiles hitting that's tragic.
Correct. And then I always, just because it's me, I've got to, make fun of riprap at some point, right? So why they didn't take the Flexamat all the way up to this concrete abutment, I don't know. But as you can see, they're just going to have to keep going back and throwing more rock at it, time after each rain event. Here is our detail for Shoreline. Most of the shorelines I do are typically 8 foot wide. We want to use the Flexamat Plus. If you have, so this is running parallel with the shoreline. If you've got an area wider than 8 feet, then you're going to start at the top and work your way down. And we typically recommend about 4 feet going into the water. That's just because if you have any muskrat issues trying to burrow in, that kind of does a really good job of deterring them from, wanting to make the mat fail with them creating a problem. So here you can see what the shoreline looked like, Flexamat installed. Now you can, the guy can mow right up to the water's edge and realistically not worry about the lawnmower going into the water, which down in Florida, apparently that happens a lot. This is an HOA I did a couple years ago. I don't really particularly wouldn't want my backyard to look like that. So we got our first job was to do about 200 linear feet. Contractor went out there, did a really good job, got 4 foot in the water, 4 foot above, cleaned everything up. Now they've got a nice clean looking backyard. And then I went back a year later and you'll see how it vegetated in real nice. There's no issues there anymore. And here's that same job. So apparently after we did the 200 linear feet, they wanted to do another 8,500 linear feet. So this is just kind of an overview of my drone shot. Here's a job. We did this before I started with Flexamat with ASP in Omaha. I just on this shoreline, this is Adams Park, I believe. I just love showing this before and after. This is just some pretty phenomenal vegetation that's growing up through it. Stream bank, river bank, once again, trenching the leading edge. If you can get past the top of the slough, 18-inch anchor trench at the toe. A lot of these are the same things. We're just being repetitive on, how things are installed. So this is, you're going to be running it sideways, and then this would be running it down. So you've got, parallel to flow and then perpendicular to flow. So here's a nice little job. The water never stopped running. So I happen to be there once again for the install. And so you can see they've got their more than 18-inch trench, which is fine. So they're going to install, you can see there's an orange spray paint mark on the side so that they know that that's where the tail is going to end. So they put in their 16 and now they can line up their 8 foot and line it there. So what I love about this job is this is not only parallel to flow, but it's also perpendicular. So you'll see in this next photo that we obviously we ran all the mats in the bottom and some of these on the side slopes parallel to flow. But when we got to this corner and here, we actually are going perpendicular. So before we rolled these mats out, we put these 2 mats in, rolled them down, and then we did the overlap there. So they're all tied in. They've got a 18-inch trench at the bridge abutment that they put concrete in. I went back a year later, which was probably 3 or 4 months ago. because I love to get my drone shots. And well, this is probably 8 months ago. It started to vegetate in. And then I went about 6 months after that, and you'll see how this thing really it's doing a great job really vegetating in.
Can you imagine what
What
that
we'd like
same
to
job
see
would
is
look like if it was all
slowing
rock
that water
riprap?
down.
I know you're running out of time, but can you imagine how bad that would look if it was all rock filled with
Oh,
trash?
exactly. It looks bad enough with the rock that washed down there.
Yeah.
So here's a job I did with ASP. This is down in Springfield, Missouri. Just happened to be out there when before the job was even bid. Not a big fan of how much rock they put in there, but you'll see they lined both sides of the channel. And I was fortunate enough, I got out there, you know, it's hard to see in this photo, but they planted a lot of trees in this side over here. And it was probably a couple months ago. I happened to be out there, and I mean, it's phenomenal. It just vegetated in greatly. We do overflow areas. So you'll see this is a job I did with Quick Supply in Ankeny. You got 2 retention ponds. This thing, I really need to get back out there, Bill. The last time I was out there, it was too cold and it was dormant, but this thing has really done a good job vegetating in. I just leave this in here. One thing you don't want to do is design the Flexamat to end up at the edge of the outlet. That's a bad deal, because now the water comes out. It has a chance to rip down that side and create a real problem. The contractor did do a good job. They kind of bermed it up, and now that it didn't really cut into it. So it's done a good job holding its place in there. Here's a job down in Texas, just, you know, showing the steel sheet piling. They've got it trenched in and with a lip of concrete. Unfortunately, on this next slide, I wish they would have went down a ways and got the area where it shows super vegetation down there. So you can see how this is staged. That obviously was laid first, and this was second, with where the vegetation factor is on this install. Here's a job, levee flood control. They wanted to use non-woven, and they were actually going to cover up the mat with like 3 or 4 inches of dirt and then seed on top of it. So this is a very challenging job. It was really, really more difficult than I thought. This is just part of it. Obviously, I just love, you can see these are cross plate anchors in there. DOTs. I'm going to just try to run through these as fast as the slides will let me. Here's that median job. The only reason I put this one back in again was to show the guardrail, the post. We literally told the guy that he was going to have to cut out a couple block, and instead he found out that the post fit directly in between 2 block. So that actually, as you can see, that would have been a nightmare. There's thousands and thousands of posts there. And then here's the other end of the job. It was much wider, so we used a 16-foot wide mat instead of an 8. And I go by this job a lot because I live in Indiana, and it looks way better than even that right there, but it came in very nice. Here's another NDOT job that we did. It's really hard to tell in this photo, but that is a 2-to-1. And the contractor did have to use more than 1 mat. And I'm telling you, this guy did a phenomenal job with the install. And then just a different view showing the whole thing at a different elevation. You always see these curb cuts. You know, people like to put riprap down there. I just think it looks better if you put Flexamat going down the slope, you know, so you can get that nice, clean, vegetated look rather than the rock sitting in there. Here's a job with ASP in no man's land, Edmonton, Kansas. And the only reason I show this job is because it's a great example of how we used to do the install before we had the tail. See how time consuming this is for the contractor? He had to roll down a roll and then peel back and peel back and peel back. Just very, very time consuming. And the water flow, so the main concentrate is hitting there. That's why they left the riprap over there, is because it has none of the work to do. So this was 6 months after the job. You know, then I went back a year later, and you'll see it's vegetated in very nicely. Here's a roadside job, just a bunch of 16 by 60s. You know, it's just DOTs find a lot of different ways on how to use the product. It's not just bridge abutments or slopes or outlets or, you know, anything like that. The unfortunate thing was on this job, it actually got flooded during the install. And when I went to go back, I wanted to get a picture of all the mat, and unfortunately they put 10 inches of topsoil and erosion control blanket, and now you don't even know the mat is there. And here's a job over in Davenport. This one's kind of sad. I can't go back to it anymore because every time I go by there, someone's spraying Roundup on it, and I don't know why you would not want that channel to be filled in with vegetation, but they spray Roundup. Somebody at McDonald's apparently doesn't like Flexamat. Landfills, real quick, we do a lot of letdown structures. Here's one we did recently this year. You can see the berm that they've got created here. Unfortunately, the day, this is a job that I did with ASP, and the day I went out there, I drove 5 hours to be there, and the guy told me he couldn't do the install. So I went back about 6 weeks later and got these drone shots of his install. The other unfortunate thing is I've had conversations with the engineer, and the guy forgot to put seed underneath the mat. So the engineer is going to make a determination at the end of, or the beginning of spring, whether or not the guy's going to have to tear it all out. Here's a detail with our Flexamat 10 ounce non-woven. Depending on what kind of traffic you've got, we give you different stone variations of what kind of depth you should have on there. So here's a drivable surface, you know, a boat ramp. I might make it, Bill. Here's another one where they infilled it with some crushed stone to just take out the bumpiness. Here's an access road on a windmill farm. The thing I like to point out here, this is not an erosion control issue. This is a drivable surface. So instead of using an 18-inch rebar anchor, you use a stainless steel zip tie every foot just to button up the two mats at the seam. Here's a low water crossing area. Drivable surface. This is an access haul road into the woods. The product can handle between 70, 80,000 pounds. Here's a residential gravel infill. And then the next one, you can do gravel, or you can just do a soil infill and seed in from the top. And real quick, we've done stuff out at the Denver airport off the side of the runway. And here's just curb cuts where they put Flexamat running down to the retention basin. So the water flows down, and then after a while it vegetates in. You don't even know the mat's there. Trees will grow through it. Pipeline protection, where you don't want people digging, you put Flexamat. Ducks Unlimited, we do stuff with Ducks Unlimited, DNRs, NRCSs, Army Corps of Engineers, some of the hardest people to get your product specified. Canoe launches, why not? Let's just throw in a party favor, right? Here's a job I did with ASP over in Oberlin, Kansas, a wastewater treatment plant. This was supposed to be all rock, and the engineer talked the city into using Flexamat. 93,000 square feet. We were $140,000 more than riprap, and the engineer talked them into using it because they felt like it was a better product and it was going to withstand over time. Real quick, I know you guys don't really care what the cost of Flexamat is, but I'm going to give you a few examples. Here's a job, 300 square feet. The low bidder was $10 a square foot. Normally that would freak me out, but I get it. That's like 110 by 30. Not very much there. Here's another job where they called it a tied concrete block mat. 2,093 square feet, not even half a truckload. Here's the thing that alarms me a little bit. This is the engineer's estimate. The engineer had it estimate at $15. The low bidder was at $7.75. Flexamat should be in that $6, $7, $8 a square foot range. And then here's an Iowa DOT job, 11,500 square feet. So now we've got 2 or 3 truckloads. Low bidder, $5.50. That's a very, very strong number for Flexamat. We have this on our website, you know, a project checklist. If no one's ever used it, go to Flexamat YouTube channel. Probably the biggest thing is to remind the contractor to put the seed down. This is not like a straw blanket. You can't, there's no do-overs. It's really good to have the seed down before you lay the mat down. We talked about the CAD details. They're all on our website for whatever application you're looking for. You can find them there. And then I know not all the time you can use the word Flexamat. So the generic term for Flexamat is tied concrete block mat. And I can furnish that to you as well if you want to design with it. And then the last thing is we do this for free. You have a project, you get a hold of ASP or Quick Supply or me, send me the plan pages, and this is what we'll do. We will do a mat layout on each area. We'll give you the mat sizes, how many anchors, where overlaps are, what kind of trenching needs to be done, the whole 9 yards. So that when the job goes out and gets installed, we know that the contractor knows exactly what to do and we get a successful job. So.
That's incredible, man. Get yourself a drink of water.
Do you want me to get to these questions?
I do. We want you to get a drink of water, man. That's awesome. You're crushing
All right.
it.
Can you show a drawing of the 45-degree bevel on the edges? How wide, how deep? I can send you something after this and even show you examples of job sites. But how wide, how deep? It's just typically when you go at a 45, you're just taking 2 block, which equates out to 1 foot, bevel it in at a 45 and then cover it up with dirt.
We'll include that detail with the PDH certificates.
Got it. Do you have recommended manning coefficients for bare Flexamat and vegetated Flexamat? Isn't it a lot higher than concrete pavement? So that's a tough question to answer because our manning end factor changes with every job. So depending on your depth of water I would need to know that calculation first before I could tell you what the Manning's N is. What is the strength and material of Flexamat GeoGrid? The strength is, hold on. It's a 5,000 PSI concrete. And the reason we go with such a high PSI is because we actually changed our mix design a year ago to where when we did our 28-day break, the 28-day break was testing out at 6,900 PSI, which is phenomenal from a concrete standpoint. And the reason we kind of go above and beyond and don't do like a 4,000 is because we sell Flexamat in Michigan, Wisconsin, Canada. You know, you've got a lot of climates there with a lot of freestall cycles. So you're going to want that stronger PSI in the concrete. And then as far as the grid, it's a 4net 30/30 polypropylene geogrid with 2,055 pounds per foot biaxial strength. That is the strength of the grid in the concrete. What is the seed spec? Is topsoil or fertilizer typically required? The seed spec is pretty much wide open. I would say 95% of the time it's just a typical turf mix, but you can do natives that will grow up through the mat as well. I just kind of, every state is a little bit different. You know, you get on DOT jobs, they have their own mix designs. But a lot of it's just a turf mix. And is topsoil or fertilizer typically required? Yeah, I would say, you know, grade out the area with your topsoil, put your seed, put some fertilizer down, lay your mat down, and just wait for the grass to grow up through it.
Man, that's fantastic. You're just absolutely crushing it today, man. So I'm going to take
That
away
was
the
182 slides we just went through with a lot of delays.
yeah. Oh, a lot of delays on the slides there. So I'm going to call all those Q and A's answered. I'm taking over the control now. But I'm going to end with a back to or to another one more Q and A. It looks like.
Yep.
Do you ever see required bare Flexamat? I think you talked about that with the geosynthetic. Go ahead
Yeah. Do
while I'm
you
changing
ever
the
see
PowerPoint.
required bare Flexamat? How do you do it? Um, oh, are you? I mean, I'm just wondering, is he asking if you don't get seed growing up through it?
Yeah, if you want one that's unvegetated, and I think what your answer there is when like the channel bottom where they put geotextile underneath, not the Flexamat Plus.
Yeah, so like in that one example with the MoDOT on Page Avenue and I-270, it literally seated on top of the mat, which was quite phenomenal to say the least. But I will give you an example. There are a lot of different ways. The majority of the time, it's just going to be grayed out seed fertilizer mat.
Yep.
You did see some of the soil infill. We do have occasions in one state, like in Oklahoma, where we will just ship out the block and the grid, and they will literally put down either sod and then the block and grid, or they'll put the mat with the concrete block and grid and sod over it. There's a lot of different
Oklahoma
ways to
loves
go about
sod.
it.
No, Oklahoma loves sod more than any state in the United States,
Correct.
and they're very successful with it. So another way of answering that question is we've had people say that they didn't want vegetated Flexamat, even though we really highly recommend it. So
Yep.
they didn't want to have anybody be responsible to make sure grass would grow. We've had
Sure.
those same people come back to us later and say, we changed our minds. Can we seed it? Yeah, you can seed over it, but to get some soil contact, and I'm not going to answer what's going to happen on that other project, there's a chance they're going to need to put a little topsoil on there and seed mix with it and
That
try
is
to start from
correct.
the top down instead of the bottom up.
Well, and that's a good point, Bill. Like on that example of the landfill where the contractor
Yeah.
forgot, the engineer came back for recommendations, and I basically told, so what the contractor, the quick fix, what he tried to do is just seed on top of the mat. Well,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I don't think that's going to work. So we're going to wait until April, take a seat, take a look and see what it looks like. I told the engineer probably what's going to have to happen is they're going to have to do a soil fill into on top
Yep.
and seed it. And then
Yep.
because we're on a downshoot, they're going to have to probably take like a straw erosion control blanket and lay it over the top, because if they don't and they get a rain event, it's just going to wash all that dirt and seed all the way down to the bottom, and they're not going to be able to get a fix on it.
Yeah, and maybe at a minimum they might have to hydromulch it, something to cover and
Yes,
protect that. That's always a challenge. Well, Ron, you did a fantastic job. Don Tiemann asked me to plug the IECA, International Erosion Control Association. They're having their annual meeting in February in Minneapolis, and as of today, they're still having it. You know, a lot of organizations are struggling with whether or not they're going to meet in person, but as of today, February 15 to 18 in Minneapolis, and I can't promise warm weather, but I could be optimistic. Keep in mind, I just helped a friend move, and I didn't charge him a nickel, and it was 7 degrees out and 35-mile-an-hour winds. So definitely tough conditions. But Ron, thank you for this. I'll get back to you after we're done, send you the Q&A, and we'll send out a survey to everybody that attended. It'll be an opportunity for you to ask questions that you didn't ask today, and
sure.
Ron and I will provide written answers back to you all. So with that, thanks a lot, Ron. Take care, buddy.
Perfect. Thank you, Bill.